Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Paint a Mini. So I had somebody on the channel recently request to see the Cthonians painted. That's these big guys right here. They're these big, kind of larval, slimy tentacle monsters. Thought that they might be some fun to paint. So somebody requested them, so I decided to do them. I figured while we were at it, let's knock out a couple of other miniatures from the same expansion of the game. Now, these come with the first expansion of the game, or it's either Suppressed Memories or Recurring Nightmares of the expansions. Toki, okay, sorry about that. Just had a little bit of a little kitty trouble there, but it's okay. We're good to go now. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and knock out these guys. Now we're gonna have some different color palettes for each one, but hopefully we'll try to address them in an order that will be less of a hassle color-wise. I'm going to start with the Cthonians. I'm going to take these guys right here. Now, I'm kind of imagining that they're just going to look like regular pieces of larva, but really, really big, coming out of the ground, right? So I imagine them having more of kind of like a pale, maybe egg white or grayish white sort of color. So what we're going to start with is some rainy gray. I'm going to get this bottle shaken up. Now, feel free to get out a fair amount, because I've got a big glob right there, because we're going to coat the entirety of the sort of chitin. That's the actual kind of, sludgy, skin bits of the Chthonian there. All right. I'm also not super worried about high details, because this is just a very, very simple design that just kind of goes everywhere, and you don't need to work around anything like that. So I'm just going to reuse a really, really big random brush here, and I'm going to get just a little bit of water onto the tip of this brush. Not a whole lot, but I'm just going to thin my paint down just a little bit. Just get a little bit of water into your brush, and then mix that in with your paint. Okay, and this will make the paint spread out much more. It will become very, very thin, and will let you knock out a very large surface area much quicker. Alright, so let's see what that does. Okay, so that's one of them down. Yeah, like I said, he doesn't look super different just yet, but that's okay. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. By the way, in case it was not obvious, I suppose I should have said something. Whatever, you kind of caught on. I used a white primer. I just used a white spray primer for all of these miniatures. So that's just something that you generally want to do. You generally want to do some base coats for your miniatures before you start actually painting all of them. Just kind of helps the paint stick a little bit better. Just something to be aware of. Okay. I'm already out of that paint. I've already run it all the way down. Okay, so I'm going to get out some more. There we go. So now we've got that one all set. Let's go ahead and just use this thicker paint here to kind of help spread out this wet paint on this first one. All right, that's it for the first step there. Yeah, like I said, very, very, very quick step there. So I'm going to rinse off my brush. Next up, while we're thinking about it, I want to go ahead and knock out the actual bases, and that is to say the earth texture that they're coming out of on the base. And I figured that, yeah, we'll just use a standard, usual sort of earthy brown color. So what we're going to start with is just some regular, you guessed it, earth brown. Now I'll use a slightly smaller brush, but this is another just sort of large, sort of no-name brush. Doesn't really matter what you use here because you're not doing anything super detailed. And it is a very, very large thing that you're doing here, so hopefully this will do just fine. Okay, there we go. That's one base down. So we'll go ahead to the other one here. I think I do need to get out more brown, though. I don't think I got out enough. Okay, and that'll about do it for them. Alright, so after we've got that nice brown color for the base, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the actual sort of dry brushing and the brightening up of the chitin, just a little bit. Now, I'm going to use a white color here. I'm just going to be using regular pure white. I think that if you wanted to, you could probably get away with using a fair skin color or a fair highlight color, as long as it's a very, 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 like not too bright, a very fair sort of skinish color, if you wanted to do that. But I'm just going to go ahead and stick with white here, and I think that that will look a little bit different from what we do later on. I can probably safely use this medium-sized dry brush here, this nice big bad dry brush. I think that I can get away with it just fine. Let's start with this one because it looks like it's a little bit more dry. So we're going to get some paint onto our bristles here. Going to wipe off most of them. That's why they call it dry brushing. All right, and then we're just going to, you know, kind of go over the whole guy like this, and that will just kind of really, really highlight all of the skin folds or the chitin folds or whatever, and it'll just kind of give a little bit of visual variety without being too overly saturated. All right, there we go. So that just added some nice highlighting to the Chthonian there. So I like that. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing with this one now. I'm noticing here that it looks like there's still some wetness in the sort of low contours and all that. Not too worried about it. If you want to completely wait until it's dry, you know, you might want to. I don't think it's going to matter too much here. But we'll see what happens. There we go. All right. So now we've got those Chthonians nice and layered there. Next up, I'm going to move on to some leather brown right here. And we're going to use this to dry brush the earthy base that we did a few minutes ago. So I'll be using a smaller dry brush right here for this. There we go. That just gives a little bit of color and texture to the actual earth color that we just did there. Yeah, you can kind of see point of comparison there, just what that looks like. That stands out a little bit more. That looks a little bit nicer. So now let's do that to the other one here. There we go. Okay. So now we've got some nice earth colors. Tell you what, let's actually move over to the Mi-Gos, because we've been kind of we've been neglecting them this whole video so far. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take out some entrail pink. This is a really, really nice bright pink color. We're going to do a couple of things with this color. Now to do this, I'm going to be using a Reaper medium round brush here. This is just a one size, one gauge, I don't know how to really describe it, Reaper brush. So this is pretty good right here. All right, and we're going to coat a couple of things with the Mi-Gos. The first thing that I kind of want to do is I want to do these little brains. As you can see, they're actually holding some kind of severed heads here. And they're kind of scooping out or putting into, I'm guessing scooping out, these heads some brains. So let's get them going. At this point with the miniatures, you can probably start taking your time a little bit more. Be a little bit, you know, a little bit slower, a little bit more deliberate with all of your brush strokes and all that. Because now you're starting to get into some smaller detail stuff. Now you're still not doing anything that's too huge of a deal. Luckily these brains are pretty easy, pretty straightforward. But, you know, just remember that you're here to have fun, you're here to relax. Just kind of unwind a little bit and paint some miniatures. Don't rush it, don't force it. You'll do just fine. Okay, so we've got that brain there. The other thing that we're going to do too, we'll just do it one Mi-Go at a time, is that we're going to go ahead and paint these tendrils that are coming out of their mouths like this. The other thing too is that these sort of backs of the mouths, the backs of the tendrils, as well as the backs of the brain, like relative to the miniature, like from this end, they're kind of hard to reach all the way back in there from behind. So if it's hard to do that, I don't think it's going to be a huge deal if you kind of leave those unpainted, just because from a top-down perspective, and whether it's like straight ahead or from behind or anything like that, I think that if you leave, you know, the backs of these, of the brain and the tendrils there unpainted, I don't think it's going to make that big of a deal. So don't worry about it. If you can, go ahead. But don't stress yourself out over it. Okay, So there we go. Now we've got some nice pink mouths and brains for the Mi-Gos. I'm going to rinse that brush off because we are going to do something with the Chthonians here. We're going to do stuff with the tentacles, but that's kind of a little bit too small of a brush for what we're going to do. So we're going to bump our brush game up a little bit more. And I think I can safely use the same brush that I used for the base earth brown colors on the bases. So, you know, just kind of a random, you know, kind of no-name, large-size brush here. All right, and then, yeah, we're just going to coat the entirety of the tentacles. All right, now when you're doing the tentacles like this, definitely give it kind of a once-over before you move on to the next one, because there are so many angles to look at the tentacles from all around that it's easy to kind of miss some spots. So just make sure that you get it completely covered from all around. Yeah, there we go, just like that. Okay. Gonna move on to the next one here. All right, so now we've got the tentacles all done there for both of the Chthonians. I'm going to rinse my brush off. And next up, we're going to do a few more things. We're going to involve the Mi-Gos once again. What we're going to do is we're going to take some fair highlight. And we'll take another dry brush. We'll go ahead and use the medium-sized dry brush right here again. Now, normally what I would say is that if you go straight from one step to another with regard to dry brushing, you want the first layer to be completely dry. But I don't think that's going to be as big of a deal with this, because the fair highlight, what we're going to do is we're going to dry brush the fair highlight over the entrail pink that we just did. And if it actually blends with the pink a little bit, it's actually fine. It doesn't look too bad. If anything, it kind of just smooths it out a little bit more. It doesn't make it quite as noticeable, but again, that's totally fine, because you really want to retain the pink color in these tentacles. Yeah, you see what I'm saying there? It kind of blends it a little bit more. Another thing that I've noticed too, I've looked at some paint jobs online of these Chthonians, and some people will actually paint the little suckers on the tentacles. I would honestly say just don't worry about it. Mostly because, man, I always just go back to this. The sculpts for the Mansions of Madness miniatures really just aren't that good. They're not very well detailed, so they don't stand out very much anyway. So it's kind of hard to notice them anyway. So I would say just don't worry about it. If you do this sort of dry brushing blending thing here, then that'll be just fine. You know, I did have somebody on a previous video, I don't remember what it was now, I think it was the Loiger, mentioned something about what I'm doing here isn't technically a dry brush because I'm not drying it off on a paper towel, it's called an overbrush. And I was just kind of thinking, you know, no disrespect to the guy or anything, but I was just kind of thinking, I don't really understand the difference, because the premise is the same, and that's that you're just getting a little bit of paint onto the brush and then you're wiping off most of it to the point that it's almost dry. So regardless of whether you just do that on this piece of plastic here or using a paper towel, it's still the same principle. Now I can kind of see this being an actual overbrush rather than a dry brush, because it's actually blending a little bit with the pink that we already did. So I can kind of understand calling this an overbrush and not a dry brush, but you know, semantics, that doesn't really matter too much. There we go. Yeah, that's got more of a sort of pale ickiness to it. There we go. Yeah, it looks good. All right. And by comparison, this one is noticeably more dry. There aren't quite as many wet places. So let's see what happens when we use our regular dry brushing technique on one that's a little bit more dry. I think that the contrast is going to be more noticeable, but you'll also have a little bit more of these sort of dry looking sort of splotches all over it. I don't think that either one is particularly good or bad. I think that they're both just fine. You know, if you want to do it, you know, one at a time, so that one you've got some wet entrail pink, and then you immediately go for doing an overbrush of this fair highlight here, then that's fine. If you want it to be completely dry, and then you want to do the fair highlight over it, that's fine too. It's just kind of whatever you prefer to do. That's the thing about painting miniatures. Just like Bob Ross always said in all of his videos, this is your world, and you get to make all of the decisions. In this case, this is your miniature, this is your tabletop gaming hobby, and you can do whatever you want with it. That's good. Okay, so now we've got that nice, icky, it looks more wet and animated that way. Now the other thing that we're going to do too is we're going to use a little bit of a gloss varnish at the end of the whole thing, but we want to do that when we're done with everything. All right. Now we're going to do the same thing that we just did with the tentacles there, with these sort of tendrils coming out of the mouth here for the Mi-Go. So I'm going to get out a smaller dry brush, and we're going to use that to coat the tendrils. There we go. If you want, you can even just kind of lightly do the brain a little bit too, just to kind of bring some color to the brain. You know, some little bit of variety, a little bit of texture. There we go. Yeah, that looks great. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing over here. All right. And the last thing that we're going to do with this fair highlight is we're going to go ahead and coat the actual brains that the Mi-Gos are holding there. I'll go back to my medium Reaper round brush for that. I'm just using that same little splotch of paint right there. And we're just going to coat that whole head. All right, here we go. That'll be just fine. All right, so now we're going to rinse that brush off. Well, at that point, yeah, we're good to go on the Cthonians. I kind of like them the way that they are. Now we're going to do some fun stuff with the Mi-Gos. So we're going to move on to them. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with a really, really dark green color. This is forest green. And we're going to use that as a base coat for the entirety of the Mi-Gos. And I think I can get away with using that, you know, large-ish brush, you know, that I used for the pink on the Cthonians and the brown for the bases. And we'll use that here. And I think it'll be just fine. All right, that's one Mi-Go base coat down. He will take a little while, actually, even though he's a smaller mini than the Chthonian, just because he's got so many different sort of things that you need to get out and underneath and all that good stuff. He just kind of, you know, you got to take your time with him, so just be prepared for that. All right, so now we've got our nice forest green colors on our Mi-Gos. All right, next up, we're going to go ahead and use a slightly lighter shade of green called grass green. And we're going to dry brush this over, oh shoot, too much paint. And we're going to lightly dry brush that over the wings. Not the whole body, just the wings, because I kind of want the wings to look a little bit more visually distinct from the body, and so we're going to use a much brighter shade of green for the body. But let's do the wings first, so we're just doing this grass green color, and we're going to be doing our usual dry brush thing. So let's just kind of come down the wings here. Like I was saying too, with the whole, you know, looking at it from the underside of the Mi-Go doesn't really amount to too much, so if you just want to, like, not worry about doing the bottom of the wings like I'm doing right here, I don't think most people will leave a notice, so I wouldn't worry about it, but I'm going to go ahead and do it just because I like to. Alright, there we go, so now those wings just have a, you know, slightly, it's a little bit different from just the regular forest green, but it's not hugely different. But the reason why we're going to go ahead and do that, not quite as different, is because for the body, I want it to be a lot brighter. So I'm going to be taking out this pale green right here, and we're going to be dry brushing the entire body with this pale green. All right, a similar kind of thing, I'm just going to be using the same dry brush. And we're just going to dry brush the entire body of the Mi-Go, and then after that, we're pretty much done. I might want to do something with the eyes, just because the eyes aren't really super prominent there. I'm I'm going to dot a little bit of shade onto the severed head that it's holding, just to kind of add a little bit of shade and variety to that. But otherwise, oh, and then I'm going to be using the gloss for the actual Chthonians. But that'll about do it. When you're doing the tail here, when you're dry brushing the tail, go down the tail like this. Don't go kind of horizontally. Yeah, don't go horizontally with it. Go parallel to it, because all of those little kind of low contours, the little tiny cracks in the tail, you want to keep those dark. And so if you go with them like that, rather than across them like this, then that will fill in those low contours, and you don't want to do that. There we go. So now that Mi-Gos got some nice color there. All right. Let's do the same thing with the other one. There you go. Those are the little Mi-Gos right there. All right, last up, we're just going to finish up some little tiny detail stuff. Like I said, we're going to use a little bit of shade for the heads there, just to kind of get some shade there real quick. So I'll just use my handy-dandy go-to Agrax Earth Shade right here. We're not going to need that much. We're not using very much at all. If you also just want to not use this at all, you have that option. You can probably just sort of do a sort of base coat of probably like a, you know, tan skin or something like that, and then you could use the fair highlight for the dry brushing for the head here. Or, you know, if you just want to go ahead and be done with it, yeah, you can just sort of use this Agrax Earth Shade here, and that'll just knock it out pretty quick. Yeah, you can see what kind of a difference that made right there. There we go. So now those heads look pretty good. Look more like actual heads. All right, and then, you know what? I'm going to do one more thing just for fun. You certainly don't have to do this, but I'll go ahead and do it just to, you know, have fun with it. So what I'll do is I'll take out some of this blood for the blood god stuff. I love this stuff. I've gushed about this stuff on the channel before, about how much I love it. It's great. Okay. I think I'm just going to wet it down just a little bit. So I'm just going to take, you know, one of my little brushes right here or whatever. Just kind of scoop out a little bit. Just kind of get a little bit, put it onto my little plastic surface right here. Nothing too much. That should be good right there. And then I'm just going to take a little itty bitty, teeny tiny bit of water. Not too much water. Like, I'm not even going to do just a little bit of the tip. Anyway, that should be fine, actually, what I got right there. Okay. Then we're going to, yeah, there we go, thin down this blood for the blood god. And then we'll go ahead and just kind of dab some onto the brain a little bit. A little kind of head. There we go. That just kind of bloodies that up just a little bit more. Let's have a little bit more fun too. Let's just kind of put some into the kind of upper parts of the teeth right here, the tendrils or whatever. There we go. That's cool. All right. We'll do the same thing here with this one. Yeah, there we go. And I kind of want to do a little bit of that too with the Chthonian. We'll just kind of do it like into the sort of interior of the tendrils themselves, the tentacles. And that'll make it look like maybe they were munching on some adventures at some point. I'll get out a little bit more paint, a little bit more of the blood for the blood god. There we go. That just adds some extra ickiness to the inside of the tentacles. Even get a little bit kind of coming off the rim of the chitin or the skin or whatever. Just a little bit. There we go. Maybe he was munching on a person right before he, you know, came at you here. There you go. That looks great. Okay. We'll do the same thing with this one here. Don't go too crazy with it. Don't just use a huge amount of this stuff everywhere. There is definitely such thing as, you know, too much. You know, I always say when it comes to blood effects and that kind of thing that less is more. So don't go too crazy. Have fun, you know. Go maybe a little nuts, but don't go too crazy. All right. When you use white and grays and tans and that kind of thing too, it makes it so that when you apply this blood for the blood god, it looks really especially nasty. So if you know, start with a fair, you know, not too bright color, and then apply this blood for the blood god on top of it, oof, just looks extra nasty, which is great. There we go. All right. I like that. I like that a lot. And then the last thing that I'm going to do, you certainly don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it just for fun, is I'm going to add a gloss varnish. Just to the Chthonians. I'm not going to worry about it with the Mi-Gos. But this will just make them look extra wet and slimy and gross all the time. And we can apply this very liberally, so we'll just use a really, really big brush. And we'll just get to it. Definitely try not to do it on the actual earth palette there, the sort of ground that it's coming out of, because that you do want to keep, you know, nice and dry, not hugely textured or, you know, not reflective or anything like that, because it's not really supposed to be mud. I think it's supposed to be kind of just, you know, crumbled earth. There we go. Ew, gross. Looks great. All right, and there we go. That makes them look extra wet and slimy and tendrily. And then we've got our nice little Mi-Gos there, just kind of hanging out with their severed heads. So that would be it, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, go ahead and throw it a like. If you want to see more board game stuff, if you want to see more miniatures being painted and that kind of thing, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'll try to go ahead and go through more Mansions of Madness and all that. Got a lot on my plate right now. I got all of the Reaper Doom miniatures that I'm trying to go through too. So, yeah, that's just something to kind of look out for if that's something that you're interested in. Yeah, you know, I won't really keep up any more of your time. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on Let's Paint a Mini.